Hi everyone, it's Ellie here and you're listening to Oma Community Church's sermon series. We are so excited for you to hear more, so let's jump in. And that is CCI, Christian Churches Ireland, and throughout the year they host many events, and yesterday some of us were very fortunate to be a part of that and to visit that movement. This year we're talking about going into the wild, right? Meeting people in the wild. And I can only really speak from the kids' perspective because I was there all day. But I just want to tell you one testimony of a child called Amelia. Amelia goes to a church in Dublin, and her mummy and daddy are very involved in church. And ever since I've known Amelia to exist and she's been able to talk, she's been singing and worshipping God. There's all over social media really of her praising her wee hands at the front of the church. And yesterday we got sent a message from Amelia's mummy after camp to say thank you so much for everything you do as part of the movement. And she was able to show us the wee actions that she learnt. And even though that may feel insignificant, that is massive because Amelia got to know Jesus through music. But that's only one element of it. And so today, we're going to celebrate that. We're going to talk about worship, that yes, worship is music, but is it just music or is it more than that? So before Jonny and I talk, I just want to pray really quickly and ask God to bless this conversation. So God, we come before you this morning and we thank you for who you are. We thank you that whatever we have walked in with today, God, we don't have to walk out the same. So would you release it so that our hearts and our minds are ready to hear your goodness and your wisdom and even sometimes your conviction. And most importantly, Lord, I pray that you would let your will be done in this conversation today as you would have it in heaven. Amen. So for the benefit of, brilliant. Thank you, Alan. He really is being our glamorous assistant today. This is fantastic. Thank you. So for the benefit of those in the room who maybe don't know myself. Hi, I'm Ellie. I'm part of the team here at Oma Community Church. I have the privilege of running the kids ministry upstairs, but I kind of have weaved myself into many avenues, including being very, very encouraged by the work that Jonny has come in and invested into this year with our worship team. So, I am a super fan of Jonny. So being able to sit down and talk to you today is like, guys, I did it.
It's like Jonathan Ross or something.
I know. Here we go, guys. Here we go. So yeah, I kind of entitled this "Is Worship Just Music?" But really, we're just going to have an organic conversation about music. But first of all, who are you? Tell us a bit about yourself.
That's the hardest question, probably. So yes, Jonny from. Originally County Down, Bangor County Down, the fairest county. I have one wife, two daughters. Need to get that right. So if you get that the wrong way around, it can cause all sorts of difficulties. So I wear a number of hats, not least because of my challenging hairstyle this winter weather. But so by day I kind of work in a school. I actually run a programme for challenging boys in North Belfast, and so a lot of my time is spent working with difficult boys and their families, trying to re-engage boys into education, that type of thing. I've done that for a number of years. I was a pastor for 7 years, so I left education and then came back into it after being in the church for a while. But I kind of thought it's all the same thing, whether you have the label or the title or not. It's helping people, isn't it? And bringing God's grace and help to people who need it. So I have a number of things that I'm involved in. So I do that. I work with this program. Obviously at weekends and when I'm free, I try to help out in local churches. I was a worship pastor for that time, but so I kind of continued that. I'm really interested in the theology of worship and why we do it, and giving people teaching on the why and so on. So I do a lot of that. And the other sort of hat I wear in school is I'm in charge of, I'm the chaplain really, which is in school, which is pastoral care for staff. So it's a very, very large school actually. So we have about 200 staff. So yeah, North Belfast would be a challenging area at the best times. So our staff are kind of up against it a lot of the time, difficult, situations. So I have people regularly come to me for counsel or help or prayer sometimes, and I have a steady stream of people who are Christians or aren't Christians who use that as a resource. So our principal is very committed Christian and wants to keep the profile of the faith high in the school. So I do that, and those are some of the things I'm involved in. Love pizza as well.
Noted, guys. Noted. We have a pizza night, you know who's coming. Brilliant. And I love that because it's so important that as church, we recognize that even though some of us hold a title of leadership and we have pastor, before we're pastors, we're people, right? So yes, we may be in positions of leadership that not everybody carries in this church, but the church are people. And so as Jonny has kind of alluded to through his own life, before you were Pastor Jonny Mullan, you wear so many other hats and you carry so many other hats outside of that, but that is church. And so how we come into church and how we have a posture of worship in church is, for me personally, has really opened my eyes to what and who God is and the heart God has for people. But for those of us in the room that maybe are thinking, what's this word worship? What is worship, Jonny?
That's a $1 million question, isn't it? I mean, lots of people have different views on it and different, people have written over it over the years. And some of it I've sort of come to of my own experiences and reading. Louis Giglio, I don't know if anyone has ever heard of a man called Louis Giglio. He's a very smart guy, and you'll see some of his clips on YouTube and that. And he defines worship as giving God your breath back, which is it's quite lovely, isn't it? It's like, he gives you life. He gives you everything that you have. We're packaged with gifts and talents and personalities and, all sorts of stuff. And when we give that back to him as an act of worship, that is worship. It's giving God, it's living fully the way he intended and designed us to be. And that's been quite a helpful definition for me. But biblically, there's a couple of things that, and I've scribbled a few things down. I hope it's okay. I'll try to prepare a little bit. We see worship very often as music, and obviously, most services, when you go home today, you'll say, the worship, that was awful. That guy from County Down, wasn't he terrible? His accent was awful. We couldn't understand a word he said, or you might say the worship was great this morning. I got a lot out of that, But when you say worship, what we mostly mean is the bit that we just did, right? So it's the music and the singing and the songs. We default to think about music. And that's right. The Bible is littered with examples of people singing. I mean, there's, I think, 180-something songs in the Bible. Psalms, obviously, a big chunk of that. But there are other songs, that aren't, uplifting. So in fact, most of the human emotions are covered in the Psalms. And it's not all happy clappy, I'm feeling top of the mountain. Sometimes the mountain's on top of you, is the reality. And so the Book of Lamentations, for example, is essentially, Jeremiah giving his breath back to God. And it wasn't a very good experience. His response was to give it back to God. And that response, that action, that kind of reaction against what's happening in our lives, that's worship. That's what we do, and it can be, and it should be, singing songs and worshiping God with music. Can you imagine a world without music? Wouldn't it be terrible? Even country music. Sorry. God has given us that as a vehicle to express our worship. But biblically, there's a couple other things worth saying here. I think, most Christians, I think, talk about worship as a sacrifice. You talk about a sacrifice of praise, for example. So times are tough, so we bring an offering of praise, right? We've done that this morning. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's very accurate. But for me, I always go back to the very first appearing of something in the scriptures. And when you find any theme in the Bible, whether it's God's grace or his mercy or his love or anything, if you go to the first time it's mentioned, there's quite often a key to unlocking what that means. And the first mention of the word worship is in Genesis 22. And it's funny because there's no worship band. There's no smoke or lights or singing. There's no guitars or not even lyres or, timbrels. There's nothing there musically at all. It's a man called Abraham. And he's been given all these promises by God. And they come to fulfillment in the birth of Isaac, his son. And he is on top of the world. He's amazing. In his old age, him and his wife Sarah have had this, the child of promise, Isaac. It's amazing. And then God says to him, right, take Isaac, go up the mountain, sacrifice him. It's like, what? How does that work? And Abraham they go on the journey together. He turns to his servants and he says, stay here with the stuff, with the donkeys and all the stuff. Me and the lad, we're going to go up there and we're going to worship. And then we're going to come back. And that's the first mention of the word worship in the Bible. And it's nothing to do with music, but everything to do with obedience. So my humble opinion is that worship is obedience. Worship is obedience. If he tells you to do something, you do it, you're worshiping him. If you're disobedient, you're not worshiping. And so it's in that context that I see, and that's why in Samuel as well, it says, to obey is better than sacrifice.
Brilliant. And kind of you've alluded to it in that question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Question number 2 that I kind of had in my heart is, is worship just singing and just music? Or, how else do we worship God?
Yeah. So, you're right. It's all that. You should worship by singing. It's a biblical thing. Paul and Silas, right, in the prison, sang hymns and spiritual songs in their worst moments, And then something happened, something broke through. Sometimes you sing after an event, and sometimes you sing before an event. So we're quite good at singing. I like to call it we sing when we're winning. But actually there's times, and that's good. So, for example, Exodus 15, the Exodus story. God does something for individual families. Every household, their firstborn is spared because they obey, right? They worship by obeying, and they put the blood on the lintels and the doorposts, and then they go out because Pharaoh has said, I'm not going to let your people go. And Moses says, let my people go. The Lord says, let my people go that they may worship me in the wilderness. Whole big thing there we could go into. But anyway, but the purpose of their freedom was worship, right? So they go out. God frees them, does a work in their individual lives as families, but also as a nation. They go out, and then Moses teaches them the first song in the Bible, the song of Moses and Miriam. And the first words of that first song are, I will sing to the Lord. I will exalt him. I will sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. The horse and the driver are hurled into the sea. And so we worship God for what he's done. We respond, and the singing is a natural response to that. But sometimes, like Paul and Silas, you're supposed to sing, you're supposed to win when you're singing. So you sing first because you haven't got the breakthrough. And as Christians, that's more our experience often. Some of you have worshipped this morning and you're thanking God for what he did last week. That's brilliant. But for others of us, we're singing in the hope that he will do something for me this week. And so you sing, and singing is your natural response to worship. But it is more than that. It's your lifestyle. It's your response. It's that prompting to when something happens, what's my instinct? I'm giving it back to God. I'm turning to him. I'm turning my face towards him. It's like the Aaronic blessing, isn't it? He's turned his face. I've got his favor. He's watching for me all the time, but am I turning my face to see him? He's already got his eye on me. He's already watching me. I don't see him sometimes because my gaze isn't on him. So worship is me turning myself towards him. And that can be you can worship driving the car. Don't pray closing your eyes while you're driving the car, but unless you're at the red lights. But you can worship in everything that you do. Everything. There was a book by a guy called Brother Lawrence called Practicing the Presence. I don't know if you've heard of it. And what he did, he was a monk, and he spent his time worshiping God washing dishes. Washing dishes. You can worship God doing anything, your job, in your family, making the bed, making the dinner. Yesterday, I cleaned out the shower. I was an act of worship. It was an act of obedience to my wife. But you can worship God in anything. And you can worship God here on a Sunday, on the platform or off the platform. In fact, if you only do it here or when you're here, is it really worship? Are you just visiting? Or is your life absorbed by worship? Is your natural response all the time to be towards him? So, I think it's something to do with your whole lifestyle. And the last wee thing probably on that, the temple. And we've been studying the temple as part of the worship team this year, and it's been interesting. It's been good fun. And I love kind of looking at how it's put together and it's interesting because one of the things, there's lots to talk about, but one of the things is there's a particular wood that they used to make the bits and pieces in the temple. And you could gloss over it quite easily, but one thing that struck me was this particular wood was used in 3 different ways. So they used the wood firstly to make the structure, so the beams that held the whole thing up were made by this wood. The musical instruments that were played in the ceremonies and services were made from the same type of wood. And the steps that people walked over to get into the temple were made from the same type of wood. What does that tell me? It tells me that if you're public performing on the platform, or you're a part of the structure that makes the whole thing work, or you're even the person that welcomes somebody as they come through the door, we're all made of the same stuff. We have the same spiritual DNA. So it doesn't matter if it's public or private. It doesn't matter if it's seen or unseen. It's all worship. And so our lives, all that we do, and there's so many scriptures you could talk about, all that we do is an act of worship. Romans 12 starts with presenting your bodies as a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable unto God. Something like that.
It's so good, so good. And we weren't joking, but we were also joking when we met as a worship team the last time that you spoke on the temple and the detail that you went into. And we said, oh, Jonny, you should write a book. And then, of course, the penny dropped that actually this was inspiration from God himself to Jonny. It wasn't that Jonny had gone away. Maybe you did a wee bit of research, but, that God had divinely given this to you. And to speak on it. So expect a book, guys. We're going to make it happen. Pray for it in the name of Jesus. Even if Jonny doesn't want it, we're going to make it happen because it's so good, and it's not to be kept by ourselves, and not that you are kind of keeping it to yourself, but that wouldn't happen if it wasn't that you had a space of private connection with God. And I think that's the beautiful thing about this conversation today is that if you look at me, for example, and you think, geez, Ellie knows the crack. She knows how to worship God. Come home with me and spend 5 minutes in my house. And you probably would see, warts and all, the version of Ellie, because I'm not perfect. And neither of any of us. But we're made holy. And that means we're called to be different. And how we spend our time is so significant. I have this catchphrase, spend time in time with the one who created time, because we don't have time to waste. So how we put ourselves in a posture of worship is so important. But like you said, Jonny, if it's not happening for you outside of the platform, it'll never happen on it. Never happen on it. Because God never built us to be pastors. He built us, first of all, to be followers. Yes, that is a position of authority He gives us, as He's given evangelists, as He's given teachers, as He's given us unique gifts. But He looked at Adam and Eve, who the one job was to be stewards. And only then, on day 6, did He say, wow, that's very good. That's very good stuff. Because He made us in His image. And so, Jonny, I suppose as we go on to look at private worship, why is private worship so significant? And what have you learnt from your time with God?
Right, that's the hardest question because I am not an expert in this. I have made so many and continue to make lots of mistakes and fail God and not give Him His breath back. But I really did think about this. I think, if I'm honest, I've learned one thing. I've learned lots of things, but the one thing that floats to the surface is this. God really, really loves me. Like that's it. Every time I go to Him, I spend time with Him, He is faithful. Susan said about God's faithfulness at the start. My goodness, if I could just keep learning that one thing and reminding myself that He actually really loves me, warts and all, that's it. I'm accepted in His presence. When I worship privately, when I spend time with Him, when I talk to Him, when I yell at Him, let's be honest. When there's things I have had moments in the last year where I have really struggled, and I have, if I'm honest, really thought, God, what are you doing? I believe you can turn this around. Why aren't you turning it around? I have had doubts. But through thick and thin, He has been faithful. And He has turned things around. And it wasn't anything to do with my faithfulness. It was just because we're singing it today. It's because of His amazing grace. It's nothing to do with me. And that's what I'm learning, that I'm accepted. And even with the doubts and the fears that I have, He beckons me to come closer all the time. The way has been made open. The veil has been torn from the top to the bottom. Not from the bottom to the top. Because that would be me ripping it from the bottom to the top. He rips it. A human person couldn't have reached the top of the veil in the temple. So high. God had to rip it. Makes a way open. And I have just learned that no matter what the season, the difficulty, whether it's your family, whether it's you, it's your health, or whether it's stuff that bothers you at work or anything, He accepts you right in. He loves you. That's it. That's it.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, what my family has walked through this year, and sometimes people go, how are you? And I'm like, only because I know that there's a testimony coming from this. Am I still going, And I'm sure you relate to that too. I'm sure there's seasons you've walked through and you think, not another one. I can't take one more hit, God. But the mountaintop is not where the growth happens. The mountaintop is walking out of the valley, right? It's where we get to see and we're like, oh, this is beautiful. Thanks, God. And sometimes when we're on the mountaintop with worship, whether it's singing, whether it's the posture of coming towards Him, you're like, God, you're so good. And then the next week comes and you're hit. And you go down the mountain. And then you go, what was that all for? Because it's so easy to forget. But I think a state of private worship, as we've alluded to, is saying, I'm not going to forget. I'm going to keep it here. I'm going to let what you tell me about you actually come from here to here and make it active, make it alive in my life. And that's the hard part because then you have to walk that out. So my next question is, you have private time with God, But how does that then help you lead in worship spaces like this, for example, or your own church, or
Yeah. So, I had thought of something I was going to share, but I sort of think the Spirit's drawn me back to something else. So this is important. Psalm 1 talks about a tree that's planted, it brings forth its fruit in its season. Its leaf doesn't wither. Whatever it does prospers. And sometimes we see the goal of our Christian experience as being the public. But that's actually the wrong way around. The tree bears fruit and is successful in the public arena, right? Because of what's going on under the surface. So in other words, if the roots aren't deep, if it's not close to the river, then it doesn't matter. Nothing's going to happen. So we shouldn't. The purpose of private worship is not so that you do the public thing better. The public thing is an expression, a natural growth of what's actually happening. What God desires is the private. So if you think of the 4 words, deeper, higher, closer, and further. What God's teaching us is that if you want to go higher, you should go deeper first. Because the tree only grows as tall as the roots are deep. And if you want to go further in your impact for God's kingdom and influence, you've got to be closer to the source, which is the river, which is life, which is Christ. So our goal is not to be successful or good publicly. Our goal is to be deeper and closer. And the churches do this too quite often. We want to grow and we want to be successful, but you should never make the goal further and higher. You should make the goal deeper and closer because it just happens. You don't have to tell a tree to do. If you get the environment right, it just grows. Healthy things grow. So I've learned that, and I think what happens then is when you do that privately, and then you are in a public arena, then you're modeling what you do. You're being authentic, and people spot fake. People spot fake. And so you're being genuine. And people, more than ever, with AI, with fake news, with all that stuff, I know about these things. And my kids are amazed that I actually do those. They think I live under a rock. But actually, there's so much misinformation and false stuff. You've got to be genuine. And so I think that being authentic, that's what it gives you. Because then you're not performing, you're doing what you do.
So off the back of that, if anybody is like me in this room, I love all the wisdom you can give me, but if you don't actually help me walk it out practically, I'm like, great. That's fab, but I'm still going to be at square one next week. So talking about authenticity, what are 3 habits that we as a church, as individuals, can adopt today, being authentically who we are, being honest, but creating a habit that says, this time next year, I am not going to look different, or I am going to look differently. I'm not going to look the same as I did sitting in whatever seat I did, listening to whatever God had for me to hear today. 3 practical habits. How do we do worship in 3 practical ways?
Yeah, I think firstly, see everything as an opportunity to worship. So, don't just think this is my quiet time. So I'm going to worship now. Don't just schedule it. You do have to be purposeful. So that's important. You should be purposeful, but you should also, so being purposeful is one. So in other words, you do set a time aside, but also then seeing the times in between and where God is showing you opportunities to worship. So, there are things that happen all the time in our lives, and our natural response is not worship. Our natural response is panic. And, Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount, don't worry about anything. Like, what? What? Don't worry about anything. I don't know about you, but that's most of what I do. But instead, and then Paul says, but in everything give thanks. So the antidote for worry is not, it's actually worship. The antidote, but if you're thankful, so in other words, make sure you're purposeful in worship and you're determined, but you turn your moments into worship moments, because that's how you deal with the stress in your life. And thirdly, I didn't really write these down. I think is to maybe just be aware. So be purposeful in the moments. Discern the moments that you haven't thought about that could be an opportunity for worship. And thirdly, understand the seasons that you're in. So there are rhythms of life, and there are times when you will be feeling more naturally inclined to worship. But we have this thing in Northern Ireland, don't we, called sad, don't we? Where the days get darker, and that's why we've got the summertime coming in this morning. We all got an extra hour in bed. But you understand the seasons. There's times, the rhythms of life, and things happen and things move us. But be aware that seasons come and seasons go. That you're in a season now, the season will change. Winter will go, spring will come. And equally, the good things are, so when they're there, love them. Pour your heart into them. Worship God. Be thankful. But when you're in the doldrums, when you're not feeling great, strengthen yourself. Resolve. David encouraged himself in the Lord. Choose to worship, even when it's not the most natural thing to happen. So be purposeful. So make time. Do it. See the moments in between as opportunities. And then be mindful of the seasons that your mood will change, but you have to be determined to do. I don't know if that's helpful or not. That's kind of it.
Yeah, it helps me. So I hope it helps you too. Finally, before we wrap up and we get you back up to worship behind us, we're a church of multi-generations. And the next generation isn't coming. They're here now. So what excites you the most about the next generation and their love for worship? Because I see it. They love worship. So what are you excited about?
So that's a great question. I work with young people all the time. So, and I have a mixture of things here to encourage. I think one thing I would say I'm excited about is the passion that young people bring and the energy. As I get older, I lose a bit of energy. I must be honest. You start things that didn't tire you out before, suddenly wreck you. When you're like, what happened? Life takes its toll, right? So but the young generation will just do stuff because they've energy, they've passion. And I love that about young people. That's why you need young people in church, because they keep the rest of us, alive and fresh. And if you're an older person, hang around with a young person. They'll exhaust you, but at least they'll encourage you. So I think passion, their culture is interesting. Youth culture is very interesting. There's some really good things about it. There's some awful things about it. So I think as older people, we have to, I'm talking myself about the older people. What am I? Anyway, but their culture is exciting to a point too, because their music is a big part of the culture. Yeah. Like everything has music. Everything's, every TikTok thing, has a song attached to it. So they're passionate about music. And so when you harness that passion and you use it in the church for a God purpose, then that's exciting. I think young people have a reach that I didn't have when I was younger. So they have social media. All their friends are, they have hundreds of friends, right? Thousands of friends, people that follow each other. So if you post something now, for good or bad, it can have a wider reach than we ever had. That's part of the fulfillment of the prophecy. When Jesus comes back again, it says every eye will see him. Well, that would not have been possible. But it is now. Because everyone will see the clip. So what I'm saying is that their reach, there are a couple of sort of wee caveats and that the younger generation need to be aware of. The danger of moving into performance rather, because everything's a selfie moment, isn't it? You know, how do I look? You know? And they're, you know, everyone's kind of, you look at a photograph of yourself, you know, somebody shows you a group photo, who do you look for first? You know, yourself. You don't look for anybody else. You know? And, but it's important then to not perform. So we need to help the young people to do that, because they have a great tool in using social media. And so there's also a need for real character. And to develop character, it's worship. I've written this down. Worship without integrity is entitlement. Performance without humility is arrogance. So we need to have character as well as enthusiasm and passion. But again, just to finish off then with Psalm 1 again, it's interesting that it says, or not Psalm 1, Psalm 40. Psalm 40 says, I waited patiently for the Lord. He inclined, heard my cry. He lifted me up out of the miry pit, set my feet upon a rock, put a new song in my mouth. There's worship. Even praise unto our God. Then it says this, many will see and fear. In other words, people will respond to the worship that they hear. But actually, it doesn't say hear. It says see. Many will see and fear. Now, we don't normally see songs. We hear songs. But what the psalmist is saying is, people will, yes, hear the song, but they want to see, does your life match up to what you're saying? And that will transform people. So young generation have an opportunity to show people the gospel in a more impactful way than we've ever been able to do. But they will see it and fear, and many will come to know the Lord. Amen?
Amen. So good. So, Jonny, I'm going to let you get yourself set up behind me. Thank you so much. Yes, guys, let's give him a round of applause. But I hope you've seen the heart of worship today. I hope you've seen that Jonny is very wise, but that wisdom has not come by him just, hoping for the best. He has delved deep with God. And if he can do it, so can you, right? Because it's not for our glory, it's for God's glory. And so we're going to do that now. We're going to enter another time of worship. And afterwards, as we close our service, worship is also community. So feel free afterwards to come up the stairs, have tea and coffee with us, get to know us. Thanks for listening to today's sermon with Oma Community Church. If you have a pastoral or physical need today, we would love to hear from you. Or if you would like to give towards the work of Oma Community Church, you can head to our website right now and get connected. That's www.omacommunitychurch.com. We have loads of events coming up during the week, so go over to our social medias to find out more. That's Instagram or Facebook today at Oma Community Church. And if you'd like to meet in person, we would love to see you. 11:30 a.m. every Sunday at Old Market Place.